I mentioned Ross and WEEE earlier. You know, we saw the way this worked out. This is the example of how this works in the real world. Is a purchasing agent, you know, for a factory in the United States that is owned by a European parent company. Purchasing agent gets this letter, gets this email saying from the mothership in Paris, hey, you know, we need, all of your suppliers need to be compliant with Ross and WEEE. And they don't really explain what that means. And the purchasing agent says, hey, you know, forward to all your suppliers, says, hey guys, you have until April 1st to get this done. I don't really know what I'm asking, but you have until April 1st. Then the salesperson gets the email and says, I don't know what this means. And the salesperson goes to the sales manager or the president of the company and says, the owner of the company says, I got this thing, we got to do Ross and WEEE. And the president of the company says, well, we don't really know what that is yet, so why don't you research it and figure it out? So the poor sucker salesman that gets the first one is the one typically who has to figure it out, really, is the way it works in a lot of these cases. So it's sort of an ad hoc solution, and we just figure out what to do on a case-by-case basis. Well, the thing is, if there's going to be more of this, maybe it would behoove us to have some sort of process. It doesn't need to be, you know, a big ordeal, but maybe we have somebody who's going to, you know, learn about all these different requirements and dictates that come along, is going to sort of be the clearinghouse and have our response done in a planned way rather than an ad hoc way. Maybe? So the buck stops with management, obviously, but everybody needs to know, the people that face the customers need to know what to do when the customer comes up with one of these deals. And there's actually a standard for compliance planning in your company that is based on the federal sentencing guidelines of 1991. I throw that in because I just think it's interesting. Back in the ab-scam days, I don't know if you guys remember that, but there's corporate payoffs to these Middle Eastern guys that ended up being this big ordeal. I guess there was a Jennifer Lawrence movie about it or something, but I was pretty young at the time. But so there started to be this, well, what are our ethical requirements of corporate officers? How do we comply with federal law and with shareholder expectations? And so they kind of built a guideline of what a compliance strategy would involve, right? And so they say, well, okay, you need to have effective oversight by a high-level associate. They need to be written policies. You need to train people on them. It needs to be an open line of communication. Enforce disciplinary guidelines internally. You see all that. It's probably more than we need to think about for our purposes. I think if you think about the first four and you have somebody in a position of authority owning this, and it's a written policy, it's not just a one-off or ad hoc response, and then everybody knows and there's an understanding, hey, when you get some whacked out customer request, here's how we're going to respond to it. So it's not, you know, we're not spinning wheels trying to figure it out, and everybody's communicating and understands how we're going to respond. You're going to be in better shape than most people. So I would change it and add, just know who your go-to resources are there. You know, somebody's got to own this, and it needs to be somebody with some influence who doesn't need to know all the answers, but is going to be charged with tracking them down. And because I say that because if every time you do an ad hoc response to this, it's a different person and they're just trying to get it done so they can satisfy this one customer request, you haven't really shared that knowledge throughout the organization. If somebody's watching all these whacked out requests, they can start to identify commonality. They can start to identify what works for customers. They can start to be able to creatively offer an alternative to a customer rather than the customer's dictated response mechanism, right? So like in our case at NAED, I've prided myself on being the guy that figures out the stuff that nobody knows what to do with. And, you know, that has helped me kind of learn, oh, you know, when somebody's asking for this, they really only need that. Whereas if it's always somebody different, you know, when you get the request and you don't know what to do with, you can run around with your hair on fire for a couple days when it's not really a big deal. So just have that concentrated, have that responsibility, who is the hub for odd requests. And then you have it clear. You've already got policies, written policies, I would say, for probably for codes of conduct, social media policies, terms of employment. This is just sort of another written policy, and there's boilerplate language that's probably okay there. Your lawyer can get their hands on it for you, but it's essentially just saying, look, when there's a customer request for a report, for a regulatory report requirement, this is how we handle it, this is who gets it, these are the questions to ask the customer, that kind of thing. It's just there's an expectation. People know what to do rather than just kind of putting something off. Like, you know, maybe the salesman gets this request and says, I'll get to that on April 1st, you know, when it's due. And then maybe we can handle it better. We're good at training and education in this industry. I think, you know, people would say we're not as good as we need to be, but we actually understand the concept of lunch and learns, and there's ethics training and things. And look, you say, well, a lot of this is common sense, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to remind people and have training for them, just to say, hey, if you get this, maybe it's as simple as at a sales meeting. If a customer asks for this, here's how we're going to handle that request. And encourage, this is have open lines of communication. Just blow it off is not a solution, which I think it's human nature. If you're a salesperson and you've got 50 things on your to-do list and you don't know what one of them means, you know, your instinct is to kind of blow that off and deal with the stuff you understand at the top of the list. And it's just so you let people understand, look, it's okay if you get something you don't understand. It may be important. Let's talk about it. And then just have your resources on hand. We're doing our best to help you comply with conflict minerals. It's not easy. If it was an easy solution, somebody had already figured it out. But I think in terms of some of the resources that you can use, your manufacturers, I mentioned earlier, if you're getting into that sustainability deal, your manufacturers are good resources for some of that stuff. A lot of them are living it. Interestingly, the customer may be a good source. So if the customer has, hey, you need to do this requirement for us because we have sustainability goals we have to meet. Maybe there's an opportunity there for a conversation with that customer, not focused on product or price. Hey, you know, you guys are real leaders in this, and maybe you can help us, you know, build that culture within our company. And how do we really need to respond to this? So your customers can actually be good information there. The last thing I'll mention, though, is your technology tools. And there are, specific to conflict minerals, there are some resources that we as an association don't have any relationship with. We don't endorse or anything like that. That's my heavy-handed legal disclaimer there. But these companies are members of that EICC coalition, right? And the one I just point to right quick that looks to be something that's pretty slick and could take off is something called Bomb Check. Bomb is in bill of materials. Bomb Check is doing sort of what we talked about with the IDW. So it's free for manufacturers to supply their data into a data warehouse and then give access to the suppliers to draw that data out, just on terms of material input, country of origin, and that kind of stuff. It's real cheap. I think access is somewhere on the order of $200 a year. So if nothing else, you can get a demo of it and check it out and see if it helps you. But, you know, if there's going to be an automated solution, the things that pop to mind for me are this one, and then the IDW is a natural. Maybe we need to take another run at them. But I know they got on the top of their list as they're fighting the battle over a product comparison equivalency tool right now the manufacturers don't want. So you guys have all got the substitute, the list that we've for years. Oh, if somebody asks for product A, here's the substitutes from other manufacturers. What do we call those things? Yeah. When I was a salesman, we had them too. And everybody does them, but you know the manufacturers don't like to talk about it. But everybody has them. So they're fighting that battle right now, and it'll be hard for us to nudge to the top of that agenda. But that's an opportunity, I think, in the future. And look, again, that's a field, and it's so easy to it's easy to add the field. It's not easy to get them to populate it, but here we are. So that's what I've got for you guys. Mike Marks came in, and that means that he's about to give me the hook. Anything we didn't touch on we want to talk about in the last 1 minute and 30 seconds? You guys are troopers. Thanks for being here. Thanks for caring. And have a great conference.